Hi, welcome to question 9 of the 2023 Junior Cert Higher Level paper. So question 9 is basically around algebra slash algebraic arithmetic. And it's a 10 marker. Parts A, B, and C are marked together. So that's going to give you good opportunities to get at least attempts or maybe up to the high partials. Okay, so hopefully you get full marks. Now, part A says multiply out and simplify 4x multiplied by 5x plus 4 minus 3 times x minus 2. Okay, now as I read that, I go, well, there's brackets. And brackets always mean multiply, but there's no equal sign. This is not an equation. Okay, so the normal rules of moving stuff around in algebra don't really matter here. Okay, but brackets do mean multiply, so let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing I see here is 4x times 5x. Now, for many people, that's bread and butter. They just go, the answer is 20x squared. But for some, that is a big challenge. And let's just take a second to go, like, in a sense, what this is saying is 4 times x times 5 times x. Now, I'm making it look more complicated. But in a way, I can only, or better off multiplying like terms. So if I bring the 4 times 5 together, okay, now I can move things around because it's not an equation. This is just an expression. Okay, so 4 times 5 is valid, times, and then x times x. So I've just moved the terms around, and now we can maybe make more sense of it. Now 4 times 5 is 20 times times x is actually using the rules of powers, which we will use later on. There's a little number 1. There's a power of 1 on anything. Okay, if you're multiplying two base numbers that are the same, you add the little powers. Okay, and that gives me 20 times x squared. 1 plus 1 is 2. Now, I don't need that multiplication operator. 20x squared is the same thing. So 4x times 5x is always 20x squared. Now, the rest of them are fairly handy in comparison. 4x times 4, okay, is basically 4 apples times 4. It means I have 16. 16 apples. Okay. Now, when I go over to the second half, we're dealing with minus numbers. Minus by a plus is a minus. 3 times x is 3x. Okay, 3 times an apple is 3 apples. Now the last one, minus by a minus is a plus. 3 times 2 is 6. So it's that operation there. Now we're basically done, but I can combine like terms for it to be in the simplest form. There's no other x squared, so that gets rewritten. 16 apples take away 3 apples is 13 apples. And then the 6 on the end, there's no other number similar to that, so it doesn't change. And that's my answer. So job done, move on. So that's in a sense bread and butter. I like those kind of questions because they're just, if you have those skills built up, it's just a matter of doing it, and then there's no real problem solving. It's just do. Now, for those who are not in that situation, this is something that just if you put hopefully a stronger focus on, or maybe take a few steps back in terms of arithmetic and try build up skills in that area, then a lot of other areas open up to you. Okay. Even the minus by a minus is the plus. If you're making persistent errors, now in saying that, if you're making a persistent error, but the overall strategy is right, you will still be scoring pretty high. So that's really ultimately what you're trying to do. It's not always about being perfectly correct. It's about showing your skill, okay, showing your strategy. So I'm going to get rid of all that. Now the next, so part C, let's read it all first. It says write 5 to the power of 7 times 25 to the power of 3, all divided by the square root of 5. It says we want to write that in the form of 5 to the power of p, and p is an element of q. So all that means is p will be a fraction. Okay, so the power is a fractional power. It's kind of awkward, but you'll see as you go through it, it'll just end up that way. That's it. So the trick for these is whatever they, or whatever makes most sense, but whatever they stipulate as what they wanted in, are all the numbers in that form? Well, this one's in that form. This one's kind of in that form, but 25 to the power of 3 is not in that form. Now, how would I do that? And this is a big important trick in maths. Sometimes the trick is to express something in a slightly different way, and then the whole thing makes more sense. And in junior cert, like higher level, that's true. Maybe even more so for leaving cert higher level. And it is something that I would have fallen down on. I was very bad at seeing that. Whereas luckily I had some friends who were very good at seeing that. I was able to ride on their coattails for a certain extent. So 25, I could express that as power of 5, but knowing my powers of 5 is helpful. 5 to the power of 0 is 1. 5 to the power of 1 is just 5. But 5 squared is 25. If they're the same thing, why can't I swap them out? And I can. So I end up there with 25 to the power of 3 is the same thing as 5 squared to the power of 3. Now, this is rule 3 of powers. If you have the power of a power, what you're in essence doing is going 5 squared by 5 squared by 5 squared. And the first rule of powers says I can just add the little numbers. That's the same thing as 5 to the power of 2 plus 2 plus 2, which is 5 to the power of 6. Now, rule 3 of powers does a similar thing. And rule 3 of powers says if you have the power of a power, you can multiply the little numbers. And we end up at 5 to the power of 6. So in essence, the same answer. So you can get there from different ways. But ultimately, when I rewrite this question, 25 to the power of 3 is the same thing as 5 to the power of 6. And that's all divided by the square root of 5. Now, that square root of 5 has caused me a problem. Okay, so I'm going to clear off some space here. The roots of a number, we normally, when we deal with roots, we're dealing with a square root, okay, of, say, x. That's the same thing as x to the power of 1 over the power of the root, in this case, a half. So the cube root of 27 is the same thing as 27 to the power of 1/3. And you can throw that through your calculator. They are equal, okay? So roots are in essence fractional powers. So in our question here, once we make that realization, square root of 5 is the same thing as 5 to the power of a half. Now, to finish this off, okay, I'm going to simplify the top and bottom. These are both the same base numbers, okay, so I can add the fractional powers. So that's 5 to the power of 7 plus 6 is 13, all divided by 5 to the power of a half. Now, rule 2 of power says if you have two base numbers that are the same and they're being divided, we can take away the powers. So it's 13 take away a half, which is 5 to the power of 12 and a half. Now, I'm not 100% sure if the mark scheme would penalize you for that, because it is a fraction, but it's a mixed fraction. I can convert that to an actual fraction by multiplying the denominator here by the whole number, which will give me 24. Okay, so in essence, this is the same thing as 5 to the power of 24 over 2, which is 12, plus 1 over 2, and that would be the same thing as 5 over the power of 25 over 2. I'm right. Yeah, okay. So remember, if you want to copy these notes, just send me an email at shanetroy@gmail.com. And that should be the end of question 9. And see you on question 10.